ICDRI 2024. Before I go ahead, I would request you all to remain seated for the inaugural session and the opening plenary, and please keep your mobile phones in silent mode. We are gathered here today to embark on a journey of collaboration, innovation, and resilience in the face of adversity. But before we begin, let us set the stage by immersing ourselves in the essence of ICDRI through an introductory video. Please play the film.
Investing in disaster-resilient infrastructure improves people's lives and yields significant economic, social, and environmental benefits. The world needs an investment of $9.2 trillion annually by 2050. This investment will allow communities to maintain the continuity of essential services, respond to and recover from disasters, and protect lives and livelihoods. Currently, insufficient investments in disaster-resilient infrastructure are due to inadequate data, limited understanding of risks, and higher costs. A shift in the way we perceive, plan, and manage infrastructure investments can unlock funds and generate tangible long-term benefits. Collaborative efforts across governments, financial institutions, and the private sector are essential. The International Conference on Disaster-Resilient Infrastructure is convening stakeholders to take collective action and increase investments through improved policies and institutional frameworks, governance mechanisms, disclosure, data gaps, capacity building, and risk assessments. ICDRI 2024 will accelerate resilient infrastructure investments, showcase solutions, build partnerships, agree on collective action. Join us in this journey. Let's commit to investing today for a more resilient tomorrow.
As the video concludes, it is my distinct honor to invite Mr. Amit Prothi, Director General CDRI, to present his opening remarks and welcome our honorable guests to inaugurate the conference. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody from New Delhi. You know, I have notes, but sometimes I also like to speak extemporally. And part of it is that, you know, when I see faces around the room, I really get excited. You know, I think all of us, all of you have been doing this work for a long time, or some have just started on this journey. And what really I find amazing is the community that we're able to build year on year with this conference and other places that we all meet and discuss on the importance of resilient infrastructure. Today, it is really my honor to welcome all of you to the 6th edition of the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. We have global experts in the room, and I hope you get a chance to meet each other. We have global experts online. We have senior and young researchers in the fields of DRI who have joined us. We have government officials who have come here to contribute and to listen. We have media. We have infrastructure designers, policymakers, representatives of coalition members and countries and institutions, and the CDRI Secretariat staff that has been working really, really hard to put this together. The theme of the conference this year, Investing Today for a More Resilient Tomorrow, is both timely and urgent. By now, all of us recognize that infrastructure is critical to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and investments required exceed several trillions of dollars. At the same time, As CDRI's flagship report found last year, disasters related to natural hazards and those induced by climate change are forcing much of this new investment to be diverted to cover the costs of repairs and rebuilding. Simply put, on one hand, we need more funds to build infrastructure, while on the other, disasters continue to erode what we are building. We need new solutions and a diversity of approaches that are context-specific. With that in mind, this edition of ICDRI brings together nearly 120 speakers and 1,400 participants from over 40 countries, including from some of the most vulnerable nations in the Pacific, Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, and Asia. Over the next 2 days, we will map challenges and opportunities, share good practices, and identify pathways to enhance sustainable and resilient infrastructure investments. Our topics of discussions will include disaster risk financing, insurance, risk data and metrics, labels for quality and reliable infrastructure, and engagement with the private sector to unlock much-needed private investments. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't wait to get started. I hope you all as well are excited to get started. With that, I would like to now request the Honorable Prime Minister of India to inaugurate the conference. Can we play his message?
Excellencies, friends, Namaskar. I extend a warm welcome to India to all of you. It is great to have you with us at the 6th edition of the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Your participation will strengthen the global discourse and decisions on these important issues. Friends, in the last few years, the growth of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has been impressive. We have come a long way since 2019, when CDRI was launched. It is now a global coalition of 39 countries and 7 organizations. This is a good sign for the future. Friends, as we all have witnessed, natural disasters are becoming more frequent and more severe. The damage they cause is usually reported in dollars, but their true impact on people, families, and communities is beyond just numbers. Earthquakes destroy houses, making thousands of people homeless. Natural disasters can disrupt water and sewage systems, putting the health of people at risk. Some disasters can impact energy plants, leading to potentially dangerous situation. These things have a human impact. Friends, we must invest in resilient infrastructure today for better tomorrow. Resilience needs to be factored into new infrastructure creation. Further, it also needs to be a part of post-disaster rebuilding. After disasters, the immediate focus is naturally on relief and rehabilitation. After the initial response, our focus should also include resilience of infrastructure. Friends, nature and disasters have no borders. In a highly interconnected world, disasters and disruption cause widespread impact. The world can be resilient collectively only when each country is resilient individually. Shared resilience is important because of the shared risks. CDRI and this conference help us come together for this collective mission. Friends, to achieve shared resilience, we must support the most vulnerable. For example, small island developing states are at high risk of disasters. CDRI has a program which is funding projects across 13 such places. Resilient housing in Dominica, resilient transport networks in Papua New Guinea, and enhanced early warning systems in the Dominican Republic and Fiji are some examples. It is heartening that CDRI also has a focus on the global south. Friends, during India's G20 presidency, an important step was taken. A new disaster risk reduction working group was formed with financing at the heart of the discussions. Along with the growth of CDRI, such steps will take the world to the resilient future. I am sure that the next 2 days will see fruitful deliberations on CDRI. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister to remind us that the world can only be resilient when each individual country is resilient. And I think that really is a key message for me that I take to heart. We're also honored to have comments from CDRI's newest member country, which is also a small island developing state. I'd like to now hear a message from the President of Cuba. Can we play his recording?
Señor Presidente, estimados miembros de la coalición, agradezco la oportunidad de dirigirme a los participantes en esta importante conferencia. Comienzo reconociendo el papel desempeñado por la India en el desarrollo de la coalición para la infraestructura resiliente a desastres y su excelente labor como copresidente de la iniciativa. La decisión de Cuba de unirse a la coalición es una muestra de la prioridad que otorgamos a la reducción del riesgo de desastres. Esperamos contribuir al aprendizaje mutuo. La gestión efectiva del riesgo de desastres requiere la participación de todos los sectores de la sociedad bajo la conducción de autoridades gubernamentales encargadas de coordinar de manera efectiva e integral las estrategias nacionales. La experiencia cubana demuestra cuánto puede lograrse en la reducción del riesgo de desastres, incluida la protección de la población y sus bienes, incluso cuando se dispone de pocos recursos y a pesar del cruel e ilegal bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero impuesto contra nuestro pueblo desde hace más de 60 años. Dando cumplimiento a las prioridades del marco de Sendai, en Cuba se han actualizado los marcos institucionales y normativos, los sistemas de alerta temprana y las medidas de protección, respuesta y recuperación ante riesgos de desastres. Los resultados alcanzados se han puesto a disposición de varios países en desarrollo como parte de la cooperación que Cuba ofrece. Se requiere el compromiso de los países desarrollados para incrementar la cooperación internacional y la transferencia de tecnologías y recursos a los países en desarrollo, de modo que puedan enfrentar la brecha científica y tecnológica y la degradación del medio ambiente. Excelencias, esta coalición puede y debe contribuir a incrementar la resiliencia de los sistemas de infraestructuras, así como el intercambio de buenas prácticas y al fortalecimiento de la capacidad de respuesta nacional ante los desastres y el cambio climático. Reafirmo el compromiso de Cuba de continuar trabajando conjuntamente con el resto de los miembros de la coalición para incrementar la cooperación internacional en esta esfera en beneficio de nuestros pueblos. Muchas gracias.
We will have the charge d'affaires from Cuba interpret the President's words for all of us.
Distinguished members of the Presidency, esteemed members of the coalition, I appreciate the opportunity to address the participants in this important conference. I begin by acknowledging the role played by India in the development of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and its excellent work as co-chair of the initiative. Cuba's decision to join the coalition is a sign of the priority we place on disaster risk management. We look forward to contributing to the mutual learning process. Effective disaster risk management requires the participation of all sectors of society under the leadership of government authorities in charge of coordinating national strategies in an effective and comprehensive manner. The Cuban experience shows how much can be achieved in disaster risk reduction, including the protection of populations and their assets, even when few resources are available, and despite the cruel and illegal economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed against our people for more than 60 years. In compliance with the priorities of the Sendai framework, Cuba has updated its institutional and regulatory frameworks, early warning systems, and the measures for protection, response, and recovery before disaster risks. The results achieved have been put at the disposal of several developing countries as part of the cooperation that Cuba offers. The commitment of developed countries is required to increase international cooperation and the transfer of technologies and resources to developing countries, so that they can face the scientific and technological gap and environmental degradation. Excellencies, this coalition can and should contribute to increase the resilience of infrastructure systems, as well as the exchange of good practices and the strengthening of national response capacity to disasters and climate change. I reaffirm Cuba's commitment to continue working together with the other members of the coalition to increase international cooperation in this area for the benefits of our peoples. Thank you.
Thank you to the President of Cuba for his kind messages. The coalition, I think some of you already know this, but most of you might not, now has 39 countries that are members and 7 organizations, and we are growing. And that, is a really symbol of the importance of this agenda, but also how countries are seeing leadership that is emerging from developing countries. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Pramod Kumar Mishra, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister of India and co-chair of ICDRI's Governing Council. Dr. Mishra is a former member of the Indian Administrative Service, has varied work experience in field organizations as well as policy-making levels of the government. He is a leader in the disaster management space. For example, he headed a task force of the Union Home Ministry during 2012-2013 to review the Disaster Management Act 2005 of India. He was on the International Advisory Board Group of the World Bank to prepare a disaster recovery framework at the global level. Dr. Mishra, as Chief Executive Officer of the Gujarat State Disaster Management Authority during 2001-2004, led the massive recovery and reconstruction efforts in the aftermath of the Kutch earthquake that occurred in January of 2001. He has played a crucial role in operationalizing the structure, functions, and perspectives of India's National Disaster Management Authority since 2005. He has published a book entitled The Kutch Earthquake 2001, Recollections, Lessons, and Insights. This was published in 2005. Dr. Mishra holds a PhD in Economics and Development Studies and a master's degree in Development Economics from the University of Sussex in UK. He was conferred with the United Nations Saskava Award in 2019, which is the most prestigious international award in disaster management. Sir, we'd like to invite you.
Thank you, Mr. Prothi, for a very good introduction. Good morning to all of you again. Excellencies, coalition members, speakers, experts, researchers, and delegates from around the world, I welcome all of you to New Delhi and Bharat Mandapam, which actually was started just before the G20 meeting. The G20 meeting was held here only in the next room. I am delighted to be here with you at the start of the 6th edition of the International Conference on Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, the ICDRI. Having been involved in the CDRI since the very beginning, it is gratifying to note that the ICDRI developed into a premier global forum for progressive and solution-oriented discussion on disaster-resilient infrastructure. I still recall in the first meeting of the ICDRI, a lot of discussion took place how to conceptualize, how to design the CDRI, and now the CDRI has come to a much more vibrant stage. The ICDRI has helped enlarge the conversation on disaster-resilient infrastructure by bringing together not just government representatives, but also civil society organizations, academia, the private sector, and multilateral institutions. Over the last 5 years, it has also gradually increased its geographical reach. I recollect that last year, in 2023, the ICDRI attracted participants from 150 countries, providing a platform to foster meaningful conversation on disaster-resilient infrastructure is of great value in itself. However, it is important that these conversations lead to concrete action on the ground that bring about a paradigm shift in the way we imagine future infrastructure. Not just more infrastructure, but also resilient infrastructure. Not just efficient infrastructure, but also sustainable infrastructure. Not just infrastructure assets, but infrastructure systems. In bringing about this paradigm shift, the focus of this conference on investment in resilient infrastructure is very pertinent. And when we talk about investment, we should not only limit it to the financial aspect, but also investment in human resources. Investment in resilience is essential for two reasons. First, we know that disaster and climate risk are increasing. In the recent past, we have seen flooding in Dubai, wildfires in Chile, earthquakes in the Pacific that have caused enormous infrastructure losses leading to immense human suffering. If we do not build resilience in the infrastructure systems, we will be forced to divert more and more funding to recovery and rebuilding after such disasters. To use a phrase used in the presentation of ICDRI's biennial report, this is akin to pouring water in a bamboo basket. Secondly, we must recognize that large investments are required to meet world's infrastructure needs. CDRI's research has shown that the annual investment required to address the infrastructure deficit to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, to reach net zero and strengthen resilience by 2050 amounts to $9.2 trillion US. If we do not design resilience into our project pipelines, it will be increasingly difficult to achieve the high levels of funding needed to close the infrastructure deficit, particularly in the global south. If we build systems, capacities, knowledge base, and institutions for making infrastructure resilient, we will also be able to attract investment to close the infrastructure gap. In India, we recognize that closing the infrastructure deficit and doing so in a manner that all new infrastructure is resilient goes hand in hand. The investment we have made in infrastructure, particularly over the last decade, has created better livelihood opportunities for millions of our citizens. This progress needs to be sustained. The infrastructure we build today needs to be resilient to present and future disaster risk for decades. In fact, our Prime Minister has given a clarion call to make India a developed country, Viksit Bharat, by 2047. Many other countries in the global south also aiming at becoming developed countries or developing faster. In all these cases, a lot of infrastructure is going to be built. Ensuring disaster and climate resilient infrastructure systems, particularly in the context of uncertainties posed by a changing climate, is a shared global challenge. This is the raison d'etre for CDRI. This is also why we put investment in resilience at the heart of all deliberations during the G20 presidency. We not only led the creation of a new G20 working group on the disaster risk reduction, as our Prime Minister also mentioned during his inaugural speech today, but also ensured that issues of resilient infrastructure as well as financing get adequate attention. Almost exactly 1 year ago in Mumbai, the G20 DRR working group, with support from CDRI, ADB, and even DRR, held in-depth deliberations on financing disaster risk reduction. During our G20 presidency, we also emphasized the need for addressing issues of resilience in the infrastructure working group. The New Delhi Leaders' Declaration elevated the importance of working on innovative financing tools for disaster resilience, while acknowledging the need for augmenting the capabilities of all countries, including emerging economies, least developed countries, and small island developing states for promoting disaster and climate resilience of infrastructure systems. I hope this edition of ICDRI will build on these and other global policy processes. I would like to urge you to devote particular attention to three issues. First, we must create opportunities for better articulation of infrastructure challenges faced by the Global South. During the pandemic years, investment in infrastructure suffered setback, and lately we observe sustained revival. However, this rebound is highly unequal, with the developing countries lagging. We must ask ourselves why. On the one hand, there seems to be private and public capital looking for good investment opportunities, and on the other, there is a gap in infrastructure investment. How can we address this dichotomy? How can we find new ways to mobilize finance and incentivize investment in resilient infrastructure in the Global South? How can we use tools produced by CDRI and its partners such as Global Infrastructure Risk Model for infrastructure planning? Second, CDRI must be a comfortable space to share experiences. We know that nobody has all the answers, but all of us hold some pieces of this large jigsaw puzzle. What works in the high mountains of India could also work in Andes, the Alps, and Rockies, so we should aim to replicate our successes where we can. At the same time, we must avoid repeating what has not worked. ICDRI must provide a space for not just celebrating our successes, but also for candid discussions around what has not worked. Programs such as CDRI's Infrastructure for Resilient Island States program must engage in honest reflection, celebrate successes, and learn from what has not worked so well. That is why this conference purposefully brings together governments, international organizations, and the private sector, and of course, academic experts. Third, your discussions at ICDRI should challenge and guide the development of new programs and projects by CDRI and its partners, ensuring that they will add real value to those most in need, are anchored to regional, national, and local context, and become a lighthouse for the global community. We are living through times of unprecedented challenges, but also exciting opportunities provided by new technologies and tools. We must embrace these opportunities and come up with next generation initiatives that can make a difference at scale and, of course, quality. Excellencies, to be successful, our coalition needs action from all our members and a network of friends and champions. I hope we can count on each of you in this regard. From the Government of India's side, we remain firmly committed to the cause of disaster and climate resilience. We will continue to invest and focus on resilience, and we will use every possible global forum to advocate for action. I wish you all the best for your deliberations over the next 2 days, and looking forward to the ideas, action plans, and recommendations so that we can further refine our practices, processes, and policies for disaster resilient infrastructure. Thank you.
Different perspectives and expertise to the problem that we face. With that, we will move on to the panel discussion. I'll invite the moderator to come back. Thank you.
As we convene senior representatives from governments, the global infrastructure community, financial institutions, and the private sector to address the pressing theme, investing today for a more resilient tomorrow. Over the next 2 days, our discussions will revolve around mobilizing public and private investment in disaster-resilient infrastructure, a critical endeavor in the pursuit of a sustainable and low-carbon future. May I now request the moderator, Ms. Sharda Balasubramanian, to join us on stage. I would also request the panelists of the opening plenary, Amal Lee Amin, His Excellency Mr. Firat Sunel, Mr. Kamal Kishore, Mr. Rowan Douglas,